Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Solomon Lausch. I'm president of the World Affairs Council of Greater Reading here, and we're welcoming you to our program and to a topic we don't often address in this sense. As you see from the given description of the program as we unfold. I'm going to ask now Dr. Randall Newham to introduce his colleague. Dr. Newham is at Penn State Berks campus here, as is his colleague, and he's going to introduce Dr. Milwood, and we'll then proceed from there. Randy?
Thanks very much, Saul. I hope everyone had a chance to see Dr. Milwood's impressive biography on our website. Among other things, she's been a Fulbright scholar. She has studied both in Jamaica, where she got her bachelor's and master's degrees, and her doctorate from Temple University here in the US, written a number of journal articles and so on in her field of hospitality management. But I'd like to mention also that she's been a very good colleague to me here at Penn State Berks and has really helped to bring her hospitality management degree program forward here at Berks, both for our campus and the whole community. For example, one thing I've really enjoyed is for a couple of years, she has led her students in creating pop-up restaurants here at Penn State Berks, which is a great experience for the students, of course, who get to construct a menu, do the cooking, manage the restaurant, and so on. And those of us in the public get a great meal out of it. So once we're able to resume those, I'd like to recommend to everybody on the World Affairs Council board that you look for that opportunity, because it is open to the public when that does happen. One small complaint, though, I noticed an error in her bio. It says she has 25 years of management in the hospitality industry, and I think that's only possible if she started in management at age 10, and I don't think that's legal in Jamaica any more than it is in the US. But in any case, welcome to my colleague, Pauline Milwood, and thank you very much.
And thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you to my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Randy Newham, for such a kind intro. And we'll talk offline about the years and the gaps. I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to the World Affairs Council of Greater Reading for your invitation to share today. And I look forward certainly to a vibrant and engaging discussion following the presentation. Today's topic could not come at a better time. It was just on Monday, this past Monday, that the Caribbean celebrated World Tourism Day under the theme, The Future of Caribbean Tourism, redefining the 3 S's. Whatever those 3 S's may mean to you, we'll certainly touch on that as we talk about the Caribbean and tourism. I'm about to begin sharing my slide, and I am hoping that you are now able to see my presentation. I've entitled the presentation New Wine for New Wineskins, the way forward for Caribbean tourism in the post-pandemic era. And for those of you who will indulge me, it's taken from the title, or at least the words of Jesus in chapter 5 of St. Luke's Gospel, where he says, "No one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins." Well, today's presentation is attributed to that statement in part, and in part to the quote on your screen, that older, mature wine is really the most valuable, most expensive wine. But to get there, it must mature, and the container that is used to mature the wine is critical. The Caribbean tourism product is undeniably a mature and invaluable asset to the Caribbean. And the region is now being presented with new opportunities for growth and maturity by way of an unanticipated guest, the COVID-19 pandemic. And so today's presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the vessel that, in my view, I think we should use to continue maturing our wine. It will be premised on decisive action and key regional issues, some of which I will touch on a little later in the presentation. So the presentation will span 4 sections, where I'll first start with an overview of the Caribbean region and Caribbean tourism. And I'll talk a little bit about the case of Jamaica, my hometown of Kingston, Jamaica. In the third section, share some key issues and new realities as I believe they exist coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and close in the final section with this new vessel, the new Wineskins, and thoughts for moving Caribbean tourism forward. So for those of you who may not be too familiar or just need the refresher from high school geography, there are various ways that you can define the Caribbean region. Geographically, the Caribbean is that area, that collection of 700 islands that is located southeast of the Gulf of Mexico and east of Central America. It is home to approximately 43.2 million. And I think in checking, that sounds like maybe the population of Pennsylvania, New York, and Ohio combined. I think if I have the numbers correct. And it spans approximately 275,000 square kilometers. At the center of the region, as you can see, is the Caribbean Sea. Politically, the area of the Caribbean is commonly referred to as part of the Americas, given its location, that centrality between North and South America. But there are other distinctions in the region, including culture and the language. It is a region which has a diverse smorgasbord of English-speaking or Anglophone Caribbean territories, such as Jamaica, Barbados, and the Cayman Islands. There are French-speaking territories, Haiti and the Dominican Republic as examples, and Spanish-speaking territories, such as Cuba and Puerto Rico. And not to be left out, we call them the ABC Islands, but they're Dutch-speaking territories as well. We call Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, fondly referred to as the ABC Island down there in the Leeward Antilles. And the diversity of languages is in large part owing to the former colonial history of the region. It is a region whose tropical climate, for those of you who have visited, certainly lends itself to a naturally occurring tourism product. One of the entities responsible and for these 700, or at least a collection of the Caribbean states, is the Caribbean Community, or Caricom, which represents a membership-based intergovernmental organization that sees to the social and economic well-being of the region. Caricom has 15 member states, so you're seeing those states on the left side of your screen, and they're also associate member states, such as the 5 associate members that you're seeing on the right. And there are certain commonalities that link these territories outside of the diverse language, very similar culture across the territories. Collectively, these member states have very similar socioeconomic dependencies. We are largely developing territories with economies that pretty much have, most of us have a legacy, colonial history and colonial legacy. Or proximity to key markets such as North America and South America also is a shared reality for members of Caricom. And finally, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, another entity that is representative of an intergovernmental body that supports states, and those are more the Eastern Caribbean states. So who is responsible for tourism in the Caribbean? We have both regional and international bodies. So a few of the regional bodies include the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, and more recently, since 2018, the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center housed at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. And regionally, these entities partner not only to develop tourism and to protect the tourism resources, the Caribbean resources that support tourism, but also, like the CHTA, protects businesses. So hotels, both small and medium-sized businesses, and tourism interests to promote business as well as profitability through tourism. The international partners, which are key and critical to the management of tourism in the region, are the WTTC, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, and IATA, the International Air Transport Association. So certainly partnerships and alliances, both regionally and internationally, help to support the region's tourism product. The Caribbean is regarded by the UNWTO as a region representing half of the world's most tourism-dependent economies. They're mostly characterized and referred to as SIDS, small island developing states, which have switched from a historically agrarian or mining as their primary source of economic development to service-based economies, which are now reliant on tourism and offshore finance and banking. This, of course, makes the Caribbean economies especially vulnerable, not just their developing state, but the proximity, the location, the propensity for natural disasters such as hurricanes and earthquakes, but hurricanes in particular that form in the Atlantic and find their way through that arc that the hurricanes generally travel, and certainly especially vulnerable to the global and economic shocks. So it should come as no surprise that there are 6 Caribbean destinations that the United Nations World Tourism Organization lists in their top 10 as having the highest tourism percentage as a share of total exports. So you can see Anguilla at the top end there, who has an economy as a Caribbean destination, 98%. Their tourism represents their total exports, a significant reliance on tourism as a share of total exports. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Bahamas, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as Aruba. All, again, 6 Caribbean destinations falling in the top 10 on the UNWTO site. I'm not going to bore you with too many statistics, just 2 more slides, and then we will move on to the meat of the matter. So, within the 2020 to 2021 period, the Caribbean has seen, like most other tourism destinations and regions, a decline in international tourist arrivals. And what you're seeing here is that across the Caribbean in general, there has been a decline of 61% change in international tourist arrivals between 2020 and 2021. And if you look at the list, you can see territories such as Bermuda fall, much higher than the average Caribbean decline, and St. Lucia at 69. The other territories, some hover around 61, but again, some territories a little higher, some a little lower. Altogether, what this is really showing is that there have been some Caribbean territories that have been far more affected with the fall off of international tourist arrivals than others have been. I have highlighted Jamaica because I'm going to be talking about Jamaica a little further, and we can see that on the scale here, they are also above the Caribbean decline of 61%, where we've experienced over the 2020 to 2021 year to date a decline of 67% in international tourist arrivals. So let us talk a little bit about Jamaica and the tourism product. Prior to COVID, the decade of 2009 to 2019 was often referred to as the golden age for tourism. Pre-pandemic levels up to 2019 saw inbound and domestic tourism ranking together $200+ million in terms of tourism direct GDP for Jamaica. And as far as the share of tourism direct GDP for 2019, 96% came from inbound tourism. So again, emphasizing the critical importance of cruise and air passenger arrivals to Jamaica, a significant portion, a significant share of tourism direct GDP there. It is interesting to note that the only Caribbean destination to rank among the top 10 destinations for tourism direct GDP as a percentage of total GDP, according to the UNWTO, is Jamaica, where tourism as a direct GDP of as a percentage of total GDP is 9%, right up there with other territories that are heavily dependent on tourism on the global scale. With respect to inbound tourism expenditure, you can see overnight and cruise passenger visitors spend. These are also 2019 figures of 46.3 and 21.6 million. And you can also see from this slide where this tourism expenditure really goes, because it gives you an idea of the jobs that are supported by the economy, specifically accommodation, food and beverage, passenger transport, travel agencies, transport equipment rentals, and other recreational and sports and cultural services. And with the impact of COVID, and specifically the measures which heads of government had to be taking, and specifically Jamaica, to limit the impact of COVID, many of these establishments either closed temporarily or permanently with no international tourism, or with the decline in international tourism between the period of 2020 and 2021. All right, I'm absolutely promised I'm stopping all the talk about statistics, and we're just going to well, I still have one more slide of statistics before we really get to the key issues of what all of this means. Because for Jamaica, the strongest decline, as you can see there, again, was within the services industry. Hotels and restaurants, 55%. Other services and transport, 21.9 and 7.8%. So overall, the value added for the Jamaican economy between the first quarter of 2021 compared to the first quarter of 2020, there was a decline of 6.7%, even though goods producing industries, so construction and mining and quarrying, grew by 6.7%. All right, I superbly promise now that that's the end of the stats. But against this backdrop of the reliance of Caribbean territories on tourism, what are some of the key issues and new realities now that COVID-19 has become a part of the new normal for us? One of the first realities is that a new tourist or a new tourism has emerged, where fundamentally visitor-host dynamics have now changed. There's another S, I suppose there are multiple S's that could be added, where building traveler confidence has now become critical, where travelers are looking for both social escape, but they're also looking for safety as one of the measures in which they're using to determine how they are going to plan and execute their travel to the region. The second reality is that the tourism as a vehicle was critical for achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that UNWTO put forward. And the pandemic has shown that it's a human crisis that has crippled social, economic, and environmental health aspects of territories in the Caribbean. And so a holistic approach to revisiting where tourism is and how it is now going to be needed to achieve the 2030 SDGs has to be taken into consideration. Even more so than previously. COVID has also redefined the importance for domestic tourism. So you will notice that a lot of the data I shared earlier was relating to international tourist arrivals, where much of the market comes from the North America, Canada, and the UK. However, as a number of destinations had to now seek to stem the fall or the decline in revenue, the region was no different. Domestic tourism has now found new emergence, where there is this need to promote intra-regional travel from one Caribbean territory to the next, something that has been hindered for quite some time. The role of local destination management organizations, tourism authorities, and boards, which has largely been a stewardship role, is now going to be central to redefining and this inclusive growth that the region is talking about through the lens of tourism will have to be taken into consideration. And certainly, perhaps the most important new reality is that the region can no longer afford to pay lip service to regionalism and integration, where for a very long time, Caribbean territories, in terms of individual sovereign territories, have long sought after their socioeconomic needs on their own, premising that over the regional needs. I think COVID has brought this new reality that we have to seize those opportunities to integrate a regional Caribbean tourism product, not just Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, but we have to look at regionalism in a new and very decisive manner. And so one of the things which I was very encouraged to see at the Caribbean World Tourism Day this past week was this even newer 3 S's, where emphasis is being placed on the social integration as one of the new S. So in addition to the sun, sea, sand, and whatever other S exists, social integration has now emerged with prominence. And evidence of this new reality is the Caribbean Tourism Organization embarking on a study to reduce inequality and extreme poverty via inclusive upskilling and really developing the pipeline for hospitality and tourism workers to meet the new needs of the tourism industry and to serve the social needs as well between persons who want to travel to experience new cultures and to meet new individuals. Sustainability is the second newer S that exists in addition to sun, sea, and sand. And I think the St. Kitts Sustainable Destination Council provides a fantastic example of what is being done with respect to protecting Caribbean resources and uplifting the environmental value chains that exist. The UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, is also working in Barbados to promote sustainability for small businesses, a large number of which were disrupted by the pandemic. In fact, it is said that between 70 to 90% of supply chains have been disrupted as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and consequently, small businesses have been adversely impacted. And finally, the last newer S, smart destinations. And we see evidence of this with Curaçao's digital immigration card and their passenger location card. I think Curaçao provides an ideal exemplar of how it is that technology can be used in the post-COVID era and the new reality of tracking guests and ensuring passenger safety, ensuring that they are able to meet compliance standards, that those are able to be done with clean data that is supported by travelers, because travelers have a vested interest in wanting to know that the destination that they're heading to is in fact safe and that the environment is in fact conducive to a safe and enjoyable stay. CARPA is the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and I've just mentioned them here because they have done a really innovative project referred to as this. It is the Caribbean Travelers Health App. The Tourism Health Information System is what it's called. And they have used this to really establish standards across destination regions. So one complaint earlier this year was that Caribbean territories were implementing their own protocols, and these protocols were difficult to navigate, say by travel agencies, etc. Work that is being done by CARPA can help to streamline the use of technology to help ensure health standards are adhered to for travel in the post-pandemic region. And as far as just another theme for moving forward, there is talk of uniting the blue, green, and orange economies. And I think this wraps up really where the Caribbean wants to take this concept of tourism as a vehicle for inclusive growth, where the blue economy, which refers to marine ecosystems as a means of improving human well-being and social equity, the green economy, referring to the trifold environment, social, and economic development pillars. And finally, the orange economy, the cultural and creative industries that is based on or intellectual property or talent in the Caribbean, that there are a number of destinations that are looking at this as part of the vehicle, part of the container, the vessel for moving forward, and not just thinking in silos, but really thinking, how can we utilize the blue, green, and orange economies and merge them, that kind of thinking as we're moving forward. I believe the Vice Chancellor of the university said it really well when, he talks about coming into an innovation ecosystem consciousness as a Caribbean region, where he suggests that innovating tourism products and developing post-COVID marketing strategies is critical to the reactivation of Caribbean tourism. And why I decided to share Professor Beckel's quote is because, when he talks about the ecosystem consciousness, it was last year that a colleague of mine at York University and I published a paper where we talked about ecosystems thinking. And I won't scare you with this big diagram. I'll just draw your attention to 2 points where we talked about the new dynamic between guests and hosts, and the interactions that are being both mediated and disintermediated by technology, and that their lines are being blurred between guests and hosts within a destination and across destinations, and between hosts in one destination and across destinations. And so this type of ecosystem means that more than ever, tourism has the potential to involve so many different players as not just an engine of inclusive growth, but really to offer to the tourist a far more superior experience than what they have traditionally been exposed to in a visit to the Caribbean. So I'll begin to wrap up with 3 thoughts. What does all of this look like when we talk about a new wineskin, new development, and the way forward for Caribbean tourism? I'll share 3 thoughts as I close. The first one is that this ecosystem thinking, this ecosystem consciousness requires that we radically rethink and link knowledge and service assets, where Caribbean tourism as intellectual property must be something that is identified, enhanced, protected, and developed. It requires cross-integration of tourism intellectual property. And I use the example here of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center that is spearheading work on tourism, both research and other projects, with the work of the Caribbean Reparations and Justice Program, where the pillars that entity established is on cultural institutions and African knowledge programs. And it speaks to this need for us to not just diversify the tourism product, but for us to use the elements of our Caribbean territories that are naturally occurring, cross-integrative representations of ourselves as a people, and use it to not only design a tourism product that is inclusive, but certainly one that can educate. And Elizabeth Morgan said in a quote recently that we have to showcase our historical heritage. We have to show the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. And we should want our visitors to see and hear about it, and give an educational dimension to the visit of a tourist, and to help build awareness of their own country's involvement in it. And I think that's such a beautiful way to look at cross-integrating tourism, that it is absolutely sun, sea, and sand in the Caribbean, but it is so much more. So radically thinking and linking and cross-integrating. Secondly, human-centered digital social innovation is critical. We cannot forsake the development of our human talent and the digital upskilling and training specifically to develop a competitive advantage. This includes having a labor force that welcomes women as entrepreneurs and innovators, and engage the youth talent, especially youth that are currently disengaged, not engaged, and it will help to stem the propensity of these youth, to engage in socially deviant or socially disruptive behavior. And finally, Regionalism. I will not stop hammering regionalism. Intra-regional Caribbean tourism for development and growth is critical. And we can only see that if we begin to understand the importance of synchronized coordination and collaborative leadership. So harmonizing border protocols so that external visitors don't need to navigate numerous protocols across different protocols across Caribbean territories, maybe a regional passport or the type of platform that allows freedom of movement across Caribbean territories, something that we've been talking about for a very, very long time. Other issues, there are some territories that have taken steps to reduce taxes, fees, and charges. It is very expensive, comparatively more expensive to travel to the Caribbean region and to visit some territories. One example, I think, said that sometimes it's easier or cheaper to find a plane ticket to head to New York or Florida than to travel within the Caribbean region. And I was encouraged to see that Barbados recently announced that 50% reduction in taxes. Those taxes that you will see be tacked on to the cost of your ticket. Then if you haven't noticed, look at the cost of your ticket and then look at the taxes and fees that are tacked on. So Barbados took the step to reduce the taxes for intra-regional travel, which is certainly a step in the right direction, although those destinations do not include Caricom territories. But in so doing, what can happen is that we promote domestic tourism intra-regionally. So in closing, I want to really just thank you again and to say that the Caribbean has an undeniable opportunity to repackage Caribbean tourism for maturing and growth in the next era of its development. And these new opportunities will be best met with synchronized policy, collaborative leadership, and regional coordination, so that in a very meaningful way, tourism in the region will not just lift some of the boats in the Caribbean, but will lift all of the boats as islands that are collectively dependent on tourism for their socioeconomic development and well-being. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Milwood. Very, very interesting. You have the ability to communicate on a high intellectual plane, as well as translate that into the practical requirements for enhancing the whole Caribbean region, especially in this area of tourism. So thank you so very much. We would certainly like to encourage people to submit some questions for Dr. Milwood through our chat room. And I'm going to ask Randy Newham and also Elise Mitten to monitor that for us. And while I'm speaking of you, Elise, we want to thank you especially for for handling our technological needs for this presentation today. Elise Mitten from Interlace Communications. We have a wonderful relationship with your organization, and thank you for that help today.
You're very welcome.
So again, folks, please submit some questions through our chat so that we can address these further. Dr. Milwood has very graciously agreed to address what you may submit. Upcoming in our programs. If you are on our website and you've checked our upcoming programs, you're well aware of the diversity of presentations we have upcoming. Next on our queue, October 5, The Unexpected Spy with Tracy Walder. She is a former CIA officer and FBI special agent. The topic we have not often addressed also. Then Wednesday, October 27, the first of two programs we have on the topic of Afghanistan. Dr. Larry Goodson, who is a professor of Middle East Studies at the U.S. Army War College. Well, the title of his address is What Went Wrong in Afghanistan? And I'm sure he's looking at the entire 20-year history of that involvement, the United States and our associated other nations with us. We have returning to us November 17, an old friend, Captain Paul Tortora, U.S. Navy retired, returning to us to recapture and expand upon the whole topic of cybersecurity. If you recall his presentation from, I think, 2 years ago, very, very informative and very lucid, helping us to understand the whole set of topics associated with cybersecurity. Then December 1, our second presentation on Afghanistan with Ambassador Ronald E. Newman. Before he served as ambassador to Algeria, Bahrain, and finally to Afghanistan from July 2005 to April 2007. I'm sure he'll have a different perspective, but also some similar perspective on what we will have heard just 2 weeks before, or a few weeks before. Also upcoming, then finally, the last one I want to highlight with you, December 8th, the WHO, the World Health Organization, and Global Health Governance, Lessons from the Pandemic, with Dr. Irene Langren. He is a professor and chair of the Political Science Department at Albright College, where she also directs the interdisciplinary programs in international relations and public health. And finally, as always, we want you, if you're not a member of our organization, please join us. Go to our website, very clear, explicit directions as to how you go about that. We'd love to add you to our roles if you're a member of the audience now and you're not yet a member. So.
We do have some questions.
All right. Well,
this is from Hillary Beck. How do you engage in non-Caricom countries such as Cuba into this regional discussion?
Thank you for your question, Hillary. I believe it is central to moving forward that the Caribbean as a region adopt a position with respect to our neighbor, Cuba. There are studies which have been done which have asked the question, should the Cuban economy open up and tourism opens up, how much of other Caribbean tourism's product will in fact be eaten away? And the studies have shown that overall, the benefit to Caribbean tourism from an entity like from a nation like Cuba opening up could only complement the region's product tourism offering. I believe in addition to adopting a position, a geopolitical position, statement that is made through Caricom that is supported across the region by heads of government, that should be supported, and that we seek to integrate. Health tourism is a pillar which Cuba has looked at and has engaged in quite well over the years. And I believe that the multiplicity of offerings across the region, the diversity, could only serve to complement bringing that and including that in the fold. So I believe there is some to be done, both in terms of positioning a statement as well as actively engaging them within the discussions of integrating the tourism product.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, we did have a similar question, parallel question concerning Cuba, I think from Tom McMahon. I think that's who submitted that. His specific question was, please discuss the impact and role of Cuba in this area. And I think you've done that.
Yes.
Relative to tourism, economic activity, vis-a-vis the other nations in Caricom. And anything you would like to add then beyond that, what you've already shared?
No, I think you're right. I have touched on that, and I will just underscore how important it is for us to adopt a position as a region with respect to our neighbor and friend, Cuba.
Okay. Here's an interesting question, I think, from Nicholas. Based on the last section of your presentation, would you advocate a European Union style confederation or sorts for the Caribbean? I think you've addressed that also, but what might you add to this? This might help standardize travel, for example, as he is saying.
Sure, and the model that may exist and may have worked, the Schengen model for agreement, the Schengen agreement that allows you to enter Europe and through your Schengen visa, for example, visit multiple areas. I believe that type of model could absolutely work. It will, however, require, because there are tourism entities, there has always been a challenge between the importance of the sovereign territory and if those ideals are more important than the issues of the region in general. I think it brings also into question that whilst a Schengen area or EU type of and we've tried it before, by the way, in the 70s, pre-70s, we tried a federation. It didn't work out so well for our region. But I'll say this, that from a tourism standpoint, it could certainly help to benefit an individual who knows that they want to visit multiple Caribbean territories. They're able to take one document, and this comes back to harmonizing border patrols, and that one passport, that one visa can take them from Jamaica Cuba, to the Dominican Republic and Barbados, and allow them to be able to really experience multiple parts of the tourism product with that one unified, say, regional passport. So from an EU model perspective, certainly I think that's something that the Caribbean should be looking at.
Dr. Newham, would you handle the question from Dr. Esquello?
Sure. We had a colleague from our question from our former colleague, Paul Escada, about U.S. retirees in the Caribbean. As some destinations like Costa Rica has really made a living out of having American retirees just live there. And he's wondering to what extent that's happening in places like Jamaica and elsewhere in the Caribbean.
Sure. Well, I can speak to at least knowing that Jamaica, Barbados, and some of this has come since COVID, where I believe the example was Barbados, that they were providing these traveler nomads long-term citizen access to relocate. And if you are going to work from home, why not work from a beach? So we saw that happen in the heights of COVID. But speaking from Jamaica's standpoint, from Jamaica's standpoint, I know that the Jamaican government has attempted to put quite a number of incentives in place for returning citizens and US retirees. I believe that in addition to the infrastructure that the government puts in place to support and encourage the returning residents, there is also some socio-cultural work that we need to do to prepare the island for returning residents. I've spoken with residents who are residing in the US, and they fear returning home for a number of reasons, social uncertainty and just not being familiar with Jamaica, having been away for all these years. But beginning with the government incentives, I believe also at the social level, we have to engage our local Jamaicans and really present the case of the welcome that needs to be put in place for retirees from the US, the UK, and anywhere else in the world, because we are spread all across the globe. Thank you for your question, Dr. Esqueda.
Maybe carrying on with that, there's a second part to that sometimes. I've lived in the South Pacific for 2 years, and there's always the whole issue of the ugly American way back in some of our consciousness. Sometimes it's better to come and visit and then leave. What's the other side of that coin when you see expatriates? Do you truly welcome expatriates living within your communities, or would you more or less like to say, come and visit, but don't stay too deeply? I'm just curious.
I would like to say, and anecdotally, I noticed that we have seen that trend, at least, especially over the past decade, with expats and relocating. Business development, the immersion of call centers have really engaged and brought a lot of that. I would like to say anecdotally that Jamaicans welcome the type of return and looking at expats. However, the bottom line is that the socioeconomic realities on the ground for Jamaicans who are experiencing a certain standard of living will question, is this going to result in a smaller share of the pie? So I believe, again, that the government engaging the citizenry and allowing us to see the value and the benefit of engaging and having this free movement of labor, not just to the Caribbean, but also outside of the Caribbean. This as an exchange process, not just that I'm giving up something from my local economy and it's not to a Jamaican. I believe there is some need for us to have that type of engagement, so that, again, we are creating the type of environment that is more welcoming. But anecdotally, I'll tell you, very friendly people, we welcome anyone we get. We love to have you.
Very good. Very diplomatic as well. May I ask this question? We haven't talked about Haiti yet in any significant way. And we have juxtaposition with Haiti and the Dominican Republic next door, where tourism, as I understand it, is just flourishing. And yet Haiti in so many ways is it's very discouraging, and obviously for the people there, the political upheaval, but beyond that, their whole economic history. And we see the manifestations of that, what just has been happening in the Texas border, for example. Can you comment on that, the history there, maybe using Haiti and Dominican Republic as in comparisons and contrast?
Sure, and I reflect on the earlier question that came, regarding Cuba, and I read recently, just an article, just looking at the issues, Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and I want to start by saying, again, going to something in the presentation, that it is tremendously important for Caricom, the Caricom region, to adopt a unified position with respect to our neighbors that are experiencing, political turmoil. I'm sure a number of Caribbean nationals are quite discouraged by what is currently happening and has been happening within Haiti, and the level of instability that surrounds their political system. Almost like night and day, as you pointed out, they have just across the border a flourishing Dominican Republic that is forever, copying top awards for their tourism product and their level of destination awareness. I believe it will start with Caricom taking the lead and sitting at the table. There is a lot of talk about, should we look outwards? Should we look to the UN and other national, international agencies to help, put Haiti on the right path? But I want to join the voices that actually suggest that whilst there has been evidence of historical faltering with respect to political stability in Haiti, that regional leaders do have the ear of Haitian people, Haitian interests and government. And if Caricom would be willing to take the charge and lead the discourse, sitting at the table, and helping to talk about some very difficult issues that exist in that economy, I believe that would actually provide an excellent start for any meaningful long-term change that we're going to expect to see with Haiti. Certainly a number of us are continue to be saddened by the situation that continues there in terms of political instability.
Dr. Noem, I'm sure you have a question or two, because you always do, and I always appreciate it. Is there something that we haven't yet addressed that's of special interest to you?
Well, we also have some things in chat too that I think I can bring up too. For one thing, we just got another interesting question from Dr. Escada about private investment, and he's mentioning an airport in the Dominican Republic that's actually owned by the hotels in the area. And is that a way to bring in more foreign investment to support the tourism infrastructure? So what should the balance be between, private investment versus public investment?
I'll say this, and that model that you referenced with the local ownership, it resonates so well with locals. We have tried and we have had success, and we've also had failures with respect to our national carrier, formerly Air Jamaica, and regional carrier. But I will say, and I'll say that growing up, you would always hear, we need to get foreign direct investment. And we've always looked externally for investment potential. While I believe that is critical, it is important, and you'll see that in Jamaica with the Spanish hotel chains and the multiple hotel chains that represent direct investment that bring so many jobs. It is important that the socioeconomic inclusion pillar of tourism ensures that there is a significant amount of local ownership to parts of the tourism infrastructure. And I believe if given the opportunity, there are locals, there are local interest groups that will step up to support this type of investment. To an extent, public sector partnerships. So private investment, yes, but it is also the type of investment that ensures that local communities are a critical part of the ownership and the development of these very key and critical tourism infrastructure and resources, such as an airport.
And then there was actually quite a big question that came in chat too, which is, I'm sure, one that the whole region has grappled with for a long time, which is, especially in view of the COVID crash, is there a way for the region to diversify more away from tourism? Are there other things the Caribbean can be doing as well that they aren't doing now?
Yeah, you are right. I mean, looking at the figures, the truth is that there are some territories that are just so heavily reliant on tourism that you take Anguilla or Antigua, you even look at the Cayman Islands and their offshore banking models. I don't think there is any divorcing from the fact that tourism will absolutely remain a critical part of their economic and socioeconomic well-being and development going forward. Diversification, I think, in other service areas. So, for example, we've seen really an explosion of call centers, for example, in Jamaica over the past year. I think diversifying in other services, whether directly or indirectly related to tourism, would absolutely be beneficial for us. I don't think it is going to happen anymore with agriculture or with mining and quarrying or with construction. Those are what they are. I think any kind of diversification has to be deepening in the services industry and looking, as we said, for, where's our intellectual property? What do we do uniquely that we do really well? And that's hospitality and tourism, and really building out those services and creating a competitive advantage there.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. One of your major points in your presentation, maybe about halfway through, I think you were talking about the efforts to reduce the economic inequality within sectors of the population. I think you said it that way. If you didn't, I'm sorry. But if that is a topic of concern, could you address that a little bit more?
Sure. Tourism has often and for a long time been seen as a luxury good, right? A luxury product. We see these, fancy hotels going up, and the more expansive, and I'll talk from my own experience in Jamaica, the more expansive our hospitality and tourism sector came, it was the more exclusion that happened to the locals. These local beaches were no longer accessible, or we could no longer enjoy this part of the town because it now became a resort town. This became pedestrianized, a section, we grew up here and this is now pedestrianized. So because this luxury product was also enjoying itself with a number of tax holidays, and as a quote, heavily subsidized industry, very often folks saw this as, look, this is just about the large hotels that benefit and the carriers that are able to transport travelers to the region. But what we call in Jamaica the small man, the individual Jamaican, was not benefiting. And we saw that in the past 10, 20 years. Multiple studies about our multiplier effect showed, look, that tourism dollar was not reaching the bottom. And so steps have been taken for using tourism to address inequities. And so tourism linkages, for example, have been established where local farmers are now brought directly into large all-inclusives as suppliers. So the supply chain and the value chain is now being made to extend further to the individual who once felt very marginalized by tourism, especially by all-inclusive concepts that would take a visitor and keep them in that area for 7 to 10 days, and the local community, local resident would never interact. In fact, in some instances, you were told, do not go here, do not interact with the locals. That local probably wants the opportunity to sell a straw bag or have some kind of memorabilia. And so the Falmouth Pier in Trelawney really, I think, made a good step in terms of developing the locals as part of the tourism product. But that is just one example for how we can use tourism to address the more marginalized in our society and really bring them into the picture of what has traditionally been social grandeur. Let's really get down to the nuts and bolts of how we can engage them in our tourism product for inclusive growth.
Well, I liked your point too, that I think you made at one point about that makes for a better visitor experience too. I mean, I know, for example, I know a lot of people who have gone to Cuba and they don't just want to sit on a beach in Cuba. They want to see how they roll cigars. They want to go to the nightclubs and hear the music. They want to, be driven around by someone in one of these cool 1950s American cars. I mean, it's that kind of cultural immersion that I think a lot of tourists want, because there's so many places that you can go and sit on the beach. You could do that in Florida, you know, but adding the other things to it. I mean, I know from my own limited experience in the Caribbean, when we were in the Bahamas, one of the neatest things I did with my sons was went to a place that had an immersive experience of the pirates, called Pirates of Nassau, where you go through and you get to go into simulated pirate ships with rats running in the corner, and you know, all as though you're really in the experience. And you know, things like that, where you get people off the cruise boats and out off the beaches and really, you know, into the culture or history, I think is more fun for the visitors, but also benefits the local people.
Yes, and that's where the orange economy comes so nicely into play, where the cultural and creative industries have to be developed as part of the tourism product. I mean, the film, you know, local film is really exploding, you know, in Jamaica and across the Caribbean. And that's an example of how we can build the local creative and cultural industries into tourism.
Well, we're running close to our end of our time. Elise Mitten, we did have an earlier question. Could you re-emphasize for folks how they can revisit this program on our Facebook, for example?
Yes, the presentation is being live streamed to the Facebook page and for World Council. And so it's just a matter of Facebook/WAC Reading, and you will see the live stream there. It is the first one that appears. And the more you visit, the more opportunities we have to say you were on the presentation here, as well as count you in for the live stream on Facebook. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
Well, Dr. Milwood, I'll contact you separately, but a lot of our discussion today all focuses on culture, of course. And we have our own Pennsylvania Dutch culture. You're probably familiar with this, the food, if anything else. But we have a small gift for you representing, it's a ceramic developed by a local artist. And I'll contact you about how we might get that to you. We really appreciate this. Is there anything final you'd like to say in summary that you haven't already addressed?
Certainly that, as Elise played the opening video, I'm so grateful to see how a discussion on Caribbean tourism could fit with the goals and the direction that the World Affairs Council of Greater Reading is going. And I'm truly delighted and honored to have been a part of today's panel and just to share about Caribbean tourism. So I certainly am indebted to you and the World Affairs Council of Greater Reading for the opportunity to share on something so near and dear to my heart. Thank you very much to Sal and to Elise, to Randy, and everyone. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Newland, thank
So
you
welcome.
for making this contact possible with Dr. Millwood. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Saul. And I think everyone agrees that we should start planning our World Affairs Council of Reading trip to the Caribbean. And we'll be talking with Paul about that, and we'll see what we can do.
We can do that. You got that right. Yeah. Well, thank you all, everyone in the audience. We hope you've enjoyed the day. And we'll see you when we next up. Just a reminder that October 5, The Unexpected Spy with Tracy Walder at noontime, same as today. That's a Tuesday, incidentally, not a Wednesday. All right. Thanks again,
Okay.
Dr. Millwood, and thank you everyone for your participation and listening to this program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.